The last time that we were here and that we had a one-on-one interview with you was 2018. It was the Country Club at Woodmore, and you had just been elected. Things had just kind of come together, and wow, a long time ago. Does it feel like yesterday, or does it feel like 20 years ago?
It feels like the whole world has changed since 2018. You know, I think unlike most blocks of time, the last four felt like 8 years. Yeah, and you know what, and I think in a lot of ways what we accomplished in the 4-year period was accelerated because of COVID. So COVID was a challenge and a blessing all at the same time. Yeah, it acted that way. So 18 feels like so long ago, but you know what, the good thing is that I think we have a lot to show for it. That's really what I feel. I feel we have a lot to show for the time, and all of us have grown. You know, it gave us an opportunity to not only focus laser-like on issues that have been here for decades. That's the truth. Because similar to what we've seen in regions around the country, we were able here to really unearth some of the concerns we had were magnified. So for example, if we said that there was a problem with health care, then that was magnified times 100 when we had trouble getting to hospitals, when the hospitals were to capacity, when we had to, you know, have the tractor trailers in the parking lots with ICU units. That was magnified. I think people now really understand what we mean when we talk about food deserts. You know, it's like, unfortunately, the comorbidities, the diabetes, high blood pressure, kidney disease, all of the things that really made us sicker during COVID, they were so present in this community, but those things are generally foodborne illnesses. And so I think people were able to make in real life connections between what is the consequence of not having access to healthy foods and having to rely on fast foods, the things that cause us to have those diseases and illnesses. And you know, if you heard on the news, well, if you have high blood pressure, diabetes, and you get COVID, then you should know this may make you sicker. You know, it's like, so people really experienced what it meant, and then it gave us the opportunity to talk to the public about closing up food deserts. So it's just, you know, it's just one issue after the next. We were able to tackle in a whole different way because of COVID.
Well, that sort of leads to some of the things we wanted to ask you about, because the difference between then and now is almost like night and day. How did it impact you in the world that you live in, and who were you then as opposed to who you are now? Is it a great difference, or do you feel like you're still grounded?
You know what, I feel now, as far as I am concerned, I feel like I'm grounded in much the same way, because even as COVID was happening, it necessitated getting out even during COVID. You know, what we did with food drives, and it was necessary for us to still communicate with the public, but luckily these were things that were important to us before COVID. You know, and I think that it was helpful that we had the opportunity in 2019, for example, to get out into the community. We had just a whole number of community meetings and engagements and such. And during COVID, that's what people needed. They wanted to hear from their elected officials. And this, I have to tell you, of all of the qualities that I have, the kind of connection to the public is my strength. It is. It's the love, you know, that I have for the public, I think tends to be probably one of my stronger capabilities and assets. And so, you know, it gave me the opportunity to really put my arms around the people who were here. So I don't know that I was changed in any significant way, but it just gave me, I think, the opportunity to kind of really lean in a way that was just, you know, it was really wonderful.
So just one more status question before we get into the issues. Now that you're into your legacy term, and it's time to kind of look at things from that perspective, do you have more of a sense of freedom, or does it give you more of a sense of focus? In other words, do you feel somewhat released from the pressure of being the first woman county executive, or do you feel more of the focus of having to kind of race to get some of the things done that are really in your vision of what the county should be?
You know, that's an interesting question, but I've never felt free. Never. I can say over the 12 years I've been in office, I've felt the same urgency every year of it. There's so much to do, and there are so many things I want to do. So maybe it's self-imposed, it's kind of like a self-imposed pressure, but we make all these promises. And I literally go down and we keep checking off. What are the things I said? That's so important to me. What are the things we said? And then how does that square against what we've been able to deliver? So the urgency never changes. You know, as state's attorney, that was important. And the proudest moment we had toward the end there was being able to literally look at, for example, I looked at the endorsement that we had in the Washington Post when I was running for office and when I was running for county executive. We got to check off almost literally everything we said we would do. So in this same period, I am racing, but we've been that way since the first day, you know, because I understand time. You know, I understand that time, you know, I've watched enough to know that time goes by so quickly, and it takes really a lot of focus to get things done. So we're still racing. I don't know that we'll ever, for so long, I think, as I'm in elective office, I think I'm going to feel that.
It keeps everybody honest. It certainly keeps you on task.
It does, and it's fun.
Right.
You know, that's the other part of it. It's not a burdensome sort of urgency. It's really fun.
You're doing what you love.
I'm doing what I love for people that I love. So when I'm out in the grocery stores and I'm out at the gas stations and, you know, and the satisfaction is we've been able to accomplish things that people can see. So I feel so good about that, that people are saying to me in the grocery store, I like what you've done. They like seeing their county executive fight for the FBI headquarters. That's tangible. That's an accomplishment that people will be able to understand. They like seeing us talk about the Blue Line corridor. We've talked about it enough now that people anticipate it. They know that something is changing. Things are changing. Something is happening. They can see New Carrollton coming out the ground. They're soon going to be able to see Cheverly because we're going to raise that hospital and start over. So these are like actual, tangible accomplishments that people can see. They can watch Hampton Park Mall. You know, it's not just aspirational. Like they can literally see things happening here, and that's what's been. They saw the cancer center come out the ground. You know, that the mental health care and addictions care facility. Like, you know, it's just great for people to see it.
You were great on Simone on MSNBC.
Oh, thank
You
you.
and the governor, outstanding work. Loved it. It was a great piece.
Thank you.
Let's talk about the issues.
Okay.
Since we really want to make sure we talk about some of the legacy things that you are working on going forward. Your investment in young people has been stellar. I don't want to list all the things here, but you have done so many things, some of them pioneering, with developing the schools and the buildings, and doing so on time, within budget. Fantastic things that are happening. The Summer Youth Enrichment Program, the Youth Leadership Institute. Your commitment to young people has been stellar. Do we expect more of that going into the next 4 years?
Oh, absolutely. Yep, you can expect more of it. So we are always looking for ways, you know, that we can improve the lives of children and their families. And this comes from not only my own belief system, you know, and understanding what those investments did for me as a child, but it also comes from the time I spent as a prosecutor. So it is the case that sitting in those courtrooms, you could always see where it went wrong. You know, there are certain common themes that we learn to look for. And one of them had to do with children, for example, who didn't graduate from high school. There's a statistic that says about 80% of the people in our prisons have not graduated from high school. So their education is really, really important. But I also got to spend time kind of looking into people's families in some of the cases we had. And you could see there where kids are not engaged, what happens, the truancy issues, kids are not engaged. So we put together, remember the truancy program, you may recall, in the state's attorney's office. And truancy was a huge issue. And we started seeing around middle school that kids really do, many of them, it's a fork in the road. So they either go up, or this is the point where we start seeing things fall apart. But that's something that the government can do, is to step in, engage the children early, try to help kids find their path early. And I understand also that that path has to go even further than it's ever gone. So now one of the things I've been asking our team to do is to extend the age of children who can participate even in those summer youth enrichment programs, because we also know that this series of disconnected youth who are like 16 to 24 years old, we let kids go too early. You know, they're not ready at 22. We now know that, right? I mean, I don't care how grown. You know how they say.
Surely do.
You know how they say the almost grown, not quite grown.
Not at all.
But 21, 22, 23, 24 still need a lot of support and guidance. And so we work to expand the opportunities we have for that age group too. So yeah, the investments will keep coming. But the other thing I know is investing in their parents is also investing in them. So where the housing is concerned, the child's environment means everything to their development. And that's why having housing that their parents can afford is important. So it is, if you invest in the parent, you certainly invest also in the child.
These are things that are words to live by. We have so much that I wanted to ask you about with regard to education and crime, because those are two signature pieces, high priority pieces for what brings good people to a jurisdiction and which keeps good companies and good folks in a jurisdiction. What are some of the things that you have in mind, again, in terms of going forward, that we might expect?
So you're right, education crime. So there's a three-legged stool that supports and undergirds any community. It's economic development, strong public safety, and progressive educational systems. I understand those things, and so making the investments there would be very important. People have already been able to see some of it in this school construction program that we've had. So when I came into office, one of the things I promised, and again, remember I'm telling you, I'm checking off these things that we promised, was that we would tackle the $8 billion backlog that the school system had in schools that needed repairs and such. What we realized quickly is that there was no way, given the traditional construction program that we had, that we would ever be able to make a dent in an $8 billion backlog. So we decided to use the alternative construction financing program that we worked on with Dr. Golson and with the school board to try to build schools more quickly. We went to Annapolis, and one of the things we did that we were so lucky we got it done in 2019 was when we got the legislation passed that allowed Prince George's County by itself to operate under a different structure than the rest of the state. So there's no other jurisdiction in Maryland that has this public-private partnership structure that we got put in place in 19. So then when the pandemic hit, we could just still build on it. So the 10 schools that we're building, we broke ground on 10 schools in the last 3 years. Right. 6 of them will come out of the ground this year. Right. So when you ask what the public can expect, I think people need to see that we're planning for the future. I think nothing says future more than seeing schools come out the ground. Middle schools, elementary schools, high schools, nothing says future more than that, future investment than building schools. And so 10 new schools, we're going to break ground next year on an additional allotment of schools. So it has always been our design that we would be able to build in the neighborhood of 16 schools in about a 6-year period. That's been it. So three years for each of the 6 schools that we were, so the 12 schools we should be able to get out the ground in about 6 years. So you'll see more groundbreakings there. The other thing is that we have just invested so heavily in education. In fact, we have invested the largest amount of school aid in the county's history. A 12% increase last year, which also included much needed salary increases for everyone in the school system. I like this idea. I like that Dr. Golson said it wouldn't be limited to teachers and educators. We had a system-wide increase in salaries, which I really also just liked that included bus drivers and cafeteria workers and essentially every person who interfaced with the child. So it was a system-wide increase in salaries. We even had the highest paid crossing guards in the state because those are people who interface in very significant ways with our kids. So heavy investments in the classroom, including pre-K education. We've increased the number of seats that we provided for pre-K education. That was one of the things I promised because we recognized, did you know Prince George's County has the lowest kindergarten readiness score in the state?
No.
Yes. Our kids lower than any jurisdiction in Maryland. We have the lowest kindergarten readiness score in the state. So we test our kids ready to learn, and our kids test in the neighborhood of about 65% tested not ready to learn. So that meant that we had to provide education earlier. You get to these kids earlier, you start giving them the opportunity. So we've increased the number of pre-K seats. We also invested in things like eye care, vision care, dental care, provided mobile units that could go around to the schools to provide that. We also launched a telehealth program that now allows families to access mental health care basically at your kitchen table. So like that's something that we've invested. So just very heavy investments in school. You talked about crime. You know, I think that the public should also know that we have invested heavily also in combating crime in a couple of ways. We have, first of all, we have suffered a tremendous rate of attrition, kind of like the rest of the nation where our police department is concerned. We now have somewhere in the neighborhood of 350 vacancies, funded vacancies in our police department. And so we are really kind of stretched very thin. But we have used our resources to make sure that we were, first of all, trying to work on this carjacking issue that is primarily involving young people, youth, and really just trying to, again, communicate with the public about ways that they could also assist us, because we saw our property crimes really escalate, where people leave items on their seats and such and attract crime to their cars. But we have been aggressive in really trying to tackle guns. We have a whole guns unit, the carjackings, the property crimes. Those are things that we have been really working on. And then we've done kind of other creative things that my daughter didn't like, for example, like the curfew. So she told me that if she could vote, because she was 17, she said, you know, you're lucky I'm not able to vote in this election because you would have lost my vote with that curfew. But you know, the curfew was designed to engage adults. It had nothing to do with me trying to increase confrontations with youth.
Not at all.
We didn't want to interact with the youth. It was our preference that their families would take the opportunity to make sure that they knew where their young person was after 10 o'clock at night, which I think is a reasonable request for a minor.
Absolutely. And it worked.
And it worked. And it worked. So we saw about a 24% decline in carjackings during those curfew hours. So it worked. But the families were just beautiful. They responded. We started having our officers go out to places where they would generally see kids congregating. And especially during the early days of that curfew, they were not there. So the families did step in, they stepped up, so I really compliment them on that, but it made a big difference. So the curfew is not a permanent solution. It is just the case that in crime fighting, you have to constantly evolve and you change your strategies based on the environment. So there will be some other tool that we will use probably over the summer. There may be some other tool that we'll have to use, but we're just kind of looking out on the environment and constantly making the changes. Speaking of changes, I changed the leadership of the police department.
Yes, you have.
This was not easy. The whole idea of really addressing the culture that the community was concerned about, we did it. Put together a task force, brought in people, stakeholders from across the community to really honestly look at the department. And these are people who agree with me and people who didn't, who came back with recommendations that we've implemented. And I'm really proud that we have been able to make progress there. You know, it's not, it's never done. It's never done.
Not at all.
Yeah, but it is at least the case that I listened. You know, this department, when I got here, you know, within a year or so, it was something we had to, we were sued 4 days into my, my first term.
Tough time.
Yeah, but you know, I think the point is, we responded. I think the police department is better off because of the reforms. And then we brought in a reform-minded police chief who I think has also done a great job of leading us. So, so the leadership is there. We're putting together strategies and just constantly reevaluating those strategies. But the only part of it that, we have to be honest about is nothing happens if the public doesn't join us as a partner. The chief often says it's a 50-50 partnership. We are responsible for half of it, and then the public helps us also. And that's the reason we've been saying, engage with our kids, all of us. We did the Hope Collective, where we have now partnered with 15 or 16 nonprofits in the county who do the after-school mentoring who do the violence interruption, who do the additional programming for youth. So they're in the community, on the ground, hands-on with our youth, through the Hope Collective, through Tony Lee and the Community of Hope. He's the person who brought this model to us from California. So we're also doing that. So you've named it. Summer Youth Enrichment Program, the Youth Leadership Institute, the Passport Program, where we provided also just outlets for kids, basically to have fun, cooking classes and that kind of thing. And then the Hope Collective that also focuses on getting to some of the kind of the root causes and is heavy on mentoring.
Right.
And, yeah.
You are a champion for transit-oriented development, economic development. You retain David Iannucci, who we believe is doing a fantastic job.
Yep, I do too.
Talk about that a little bit, the TOD and development.
So transit-oriented development has been, it's a huge asset. First of all, those 15 metro stations we have gives us an opportunity to really activate those stations. Transit-oriented development is the smartest development we believe that we have, that really does value all the goals of the public values. They want to be able to have walkable, bikeable spaces. We want to take cars off the road so that we preserve our environment. We want to be able to create spaces where people can both work and live, where they don't have to travel into DC and other places. So, and to grow our economy in a way that utilizes the assets we have. This is long overdue, because one of the things you'll notice is if you look at transit in the region, you go along the Red Line, you go to Bethesda, you go to other places, you'll notice that our stations are some of the only stations that look exactly the way they did 40 years ago. This is an opportunity for us. It's no longer the case. If you go to New Carrollton, you'll now start seeing that finally, thank God, is beginning to look different. The same is true around Largo. The same will be true in Cheverly and some other places. So you'll notice that we now are making investments that we needed to make for a very long time. But transit is the catalyst for it. Morgan Boulevard, all the way down that Blue Line corridor, you're going to start seeing that $400 million that we were able to get through the Maryland Stadium Authority to really bring life and energy through using public dollars to attract more additional private investment.